On my way to my son's will reading, my daughter-in-law showed up with a warning: don't go there. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine running, heat fogging the windows. The coffee I'd bought that morning had gone cold in the cup holder. My leather purse sat open on the passenger seat, containing the documents I'd brought, medical bills I'd paid, receipts for his medications, photos of us at his last birthday party where he'd thanked me for moving in to take care of him. Have you ever trusted family completely, only to find out they were planning your destruction behind your back? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. If you've ever wondered how far family will go to steal what's rightfully yours, this story will shake you to your core. I'm about to show you how I discovered my own son's relatives had erased me from his will, while I was still grieving his death. Have you ever trusted family completely, only to find out they were planning your destruction behind your back? Has someone close to you ever made you question your own memory of events? Do you know anyone who's been cut out of an inheritance they helped build? Follow along as we uncover a conspiracy that took my son's dying wishes and turned them into someone else's payday. The rain that saved me from walking into their trap was just the beginning. The rain hit my windshield like bullets when she pulled up beside me. Her window rolled down, and 3 words changed everything: they erased you. I was driving through the quiet hills of Asheville, North Carolina, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I headed to what I thought would be my son Michael's will reading. The lawyer's office was just 2 miles ahead. I'd dressed carefully that morning, the black dress Michael always said made me look dignified. This was supposed to be the final step in honoring him, closing a chapter that had already broken my heart. But there was my daughter-in-law Jessica, her Honda Civic pulled up next to my car at the red light, rain streaming down both our windows. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. "Don't go to that office," she said through the rain. "I found the real will on his laptop. They wrote you out of everything." My foot stayed on the brake even after the light turned green. Cars honked behind us, but I couldn't move. "What do you mean, wrote me out?" "The will they're reading today, it's not the one he wrote. The original names you as the primary beneficiary. I have the files. If they can erase a mother this easily, what about you? Subscribe, don't let legal blindness cost you everything." I pulled into the parking lot of the law office, but I didn't get out. Through my rain-streaked windshield, I could see them inside. Michael's cousins, his uncle from Charlotte, his stepfather who hadn't visited once during the chemo. They were all there, checking their watches, carrying manila folders that probably contained lies. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine running, heat fogging the windows. The coffee I'd bought that morning had gone cold in the cup holder. My leather purse sat open on the passenger seat, containing the documents I'd brought, medical bills I'd paid, receipts for his medications, photos of us at his last birthday party where he'd thanked me for moving in to take care of him. None of that mattered now, did it? Through the rain-streaked window, I saw them laughing. 5 relatives who never called during his chemo. Jessica had followed me to the parking lot. She tapped on my window and handed me a flash drive. "Everything's on here. The real will, the emails about changing it, the plan to handle the mother problem. That's what they called you." I took the drive with shaking hands. "How long have you known?" "I found it yesterday. I've been sick about it all night." Have you ever been warned away from something you had every right to attend? Comment rain warning if you felt that gut punch. His coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. Someone had already changed the locks. I'd driven straight from the lawyer's office to Michael's house, the house where I'd lived for 8 months, taking care of him through cancer treatments, cooking meals he could barely eat, sleeping on the couch so I could hear if he needed help during the night. The house where he'd told me just 3 weeks before he died that he'd made sure I'd be taken care of. But when I put my key in the front door, it wouldn't turn. I walked around to the back door, the one that always stuck a little. Same thing. Through the kitchen window, I could see boxes stacked on the dining room table. Boxes that hadn't been there when I'd left yesterday morning to pick up his prescription refills that he'd never need now. My phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made my stomach drop. estate transition notice, immediate action required. Dear Mrs. Patterson, as part of the orderly transition of the deceased's estate, all personal property must be removed from 1247 Maple Street by 5 p.m. today. A security company has been retained to ensure property protection during the transition period. Please contact the undersigned to schedule retrieval of any items belonging to you. Sincerely, Burton and Associates. I read it 3 times before it sank in. They were treating me like a tenant who hadn't paid rent. Like someone who had no right to be in the home where I'd spent nearly a year caring for my dying son. The garage door was still programmed to my car remote. When it lifted, I saw they'd already started. Michael's tools were gone from his workbench. The fishing gear he'd inherited from his grandfather, gone. Even the extra refrigerator where I'd kept his special dietary supplements was unplugged and empty. But they'd missed something. In the corner, behind a stack of Christmas decorations that Michael never got to use again, was a cardboard box with my handwriting, Michael's important papers, Mom's copy. I'd started keeping duplicates of everything after his first hospitalization, when the insurance company lost his forms twice. Thank God for my organized habits. Subject line, estate transition complete. But I never got the reading invitation that was supposedly sent. Ever been locked out of a space where you belonged? Drop locked out below. The laptop password was still Mom 2021, the year I moved in to help him fight cancer. Jessica met me at the Starbucks on Tunnel Road, the one Michael used to joke had better Wi-Fi than the hospital. She slid his MacBook across the small table between us, her hands shaking slightly. I haven't slept since I found this stuff. I keep thinking about how they must have planned this while he was still alive. I opened the laptop, typed in the password I'd helped him set up when his hands got too weak to type long passwords. The desktop loaded with the same wallpaper photo, me and Michael at the beach last summer, both of us smiling, both of us believing he'd beat this thing. Click on Documents, Jessica whispered. Then the folder called Will Stuff. There were 12 files in that folder. 12 different versions of his will, dated over the past year. I opened the oldest one first. Version 1, March 15, 2023. I leave everything to my mother, Patricia Patterson, who has given up her own life to take care of me. Version 6, July 22, 2023, same thing. Everything to me, with Jessica getting his personal photos and my grandmother's ring. But then something changed. Version 10, October 3, 2023, Jessica pulled closer to read over my shoulder. This version split everything 3 ways, me, Jessica, and something called the Patterson Family Trust, managed by his Uncle Robert. Version 12, November 15, 2023, the final version. The one dated just 2 weeks before Michael died. Everything to the family trust. Jessica got a small cash gift. I got nothing. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the email thread I found in his sent folder. From Michael Patterson. To Robert Patterson. Subject, Mom's situation. Date, October 15, 2023, 2:47 a.m. Uncle Rob, she's getting suspicious about the changes. Maybe we should slow down. From Robert Patterson. To Michael Patterson. Subject, Mom's situation. Date, October 15, 2023, 6:12 a.m. Mike, stick to the plan. She'll contest if she knows what's coming. Better to handle it clean after. The lawyer says as long as she's not explicitly mentioned, she has no grounds. Digital trails never lie, but they disappear fast. Subscribe so you catch the evidence before deletion. I scrolled through more emails. There were dozens of them. Plans to manage my expectations. Discussions about my emotional state. Strategies to keep me focused on caregiving while they rewrote his final wishes. The final email was sent at 3:17 a.m., 2 days after his funeral, old woman neutralized. Proceed with distribution. Screenshot that timestamp in your mind, 3:17 a.m. What does middle of the night communication tell you? The probate clerk looked up from the computer screen and frowned. "Ma'am, there's no will filed under that name." I was standing at the counter in the Buncombe County Courthouse, still clutching the printed emails from Michael's laptop. The clerk, a woman about my age with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, had been searching for 5 minutes. "But they held a reading yesterday," I said. "His uncle called me this morning to tell me the results." "What results?" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "If no will's been filed with the court, there couldn't have been any official reading. Sounds like someone's running a private meeting and calling it legal." Her name tag said, Margaret, 23 years service. She looked at me the way my own daughter might have, if I'd had one. "Honey, how long have you been dealing with probate matters?" "This is my first time. My son died 3 weeks ago." Margaret's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. But I've been doing this job for over 2 decades, and what you're describing sets off every alarm bell I have." She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "Tell me exactly what happened at this so-called reading." I explained about the rain warning, the changed locks, the emails. Margaret nodded and took notes, occasionally asking questions that showed she knew exactly what kind of game was being played. "Mrs. Patterson, I see this pattern maybe once a month. Family member dies, relatives rush to control the narrative before anyone thinks to check with the court. Usually happens when there's real money involved, and someone's trying to cut out a caregiver. What can I do about it?" Margaret glanced around the office, then pulled out a different form from under her desk. "This is an emergency asset preservation request. It freezes everything until a proper investigation can happen. But you've got to file it within 72 hours of becoming aware of potential fraud." My hands were shaking as she explained how to fill it out. "The filing fee is $400, but if you can't afford it, there's a waiver form. The important thing is getting it filed today." "Will it work?" "Judge Martinez handles these cases. She's seen every trick in the book, and she doesn't tolerate will manipulation. If your evidence is solid, she'll freeze those assets so fast it'll make their heads spin." Margaret helped me complete the paperwork, photocopied the emails from Michael's laptop, and walked me through the process. As I was about to leave, she handed me her business card. "Call me tomorrow afternoon. If this goes the way I think it will, you're going to need to track down those witnesses they claim signed the will." She handed me a form I'd never heard of, Emergency Asset Preservation. It had to be filed within 72 hours. Ever had a stranger become your unexpected ally? Tag someone who helped when family failed. The address led to a gas station. The witness worked there, and had never heard my son's name. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the crumpled paper with 3 addresses. The first witness listed on David's will was supposed to be Maria Santos, age 34, residing at 1247 Maple Street. But 1247 Maple Street was a Texaco station with peeling paint and a handwritten, "Help Wanted," sign. The cashier behind bulletproof glass looked tired. "Maria Santos?" "Yeah, she works the night shift. Been here 2 years." She called to the back room. "Maria. Lady here wants to talk." Maria emerged wiping grease from her hands. Short, practical, with worried eyes that got more worried when I mentioned my son's name. "David Morrison?" "Never heard of him, ma'am. I work here and go to community college." "That's it." I showed her the will. Her signature was right there, clear as day, dated 3 months ago. Maria stared at it like I'd shown her a ghost. That's my name, but I never signed this. I've never been to any lawyer's office. I can't even afford a lawyer." She pulled out her phone, scrolled to her calendar. March 15th? I was in class. Introduction to Accounting, 6 to 9 p.m. every Tuesday. Professor takes attendance. Her hands shook as she screenshot her grades app. See? Present that night. The second address took me across town to a duplex with overgrown grass. The neighbor next door was watering flowers. Robert Kim? Moved to Florida last month. Real sudden like. Left most of his stuff. When I called the number on the will, a voice I didn't recognize answered. This is Robert Kim. But when I mentioned witnessing David's will, the line went quiet for too long. I don't recall that specific document. I sign a lot of things for people. You were in Florida when this was supposedly signed, I said. Another pause. Ma'am, I think you have the wrong number. The third witness answered her phone in panic. I've been waiting for someone to call about that. I never signed anything. Jennifer Walsh worked at the hospital where David spent his final weeks. I knew her. She'd brought him extra blankets when the chemo made him cold. Her voice cracked through the speaker. Someone called me 2 weeks ago, said they were from a law office, asked if I remembered your son. I said of course, lovely family, you were there every day. Then they asked if I'd be willing to verify some paperwork if needed. Did you sign anything? No. I told them I'd never sign legal documents over the phone. But ma'am, that signature on the paper, it looks just like mine. How is that possible? I knew how it was possible. The same way David's signature looked perfect until you put it under a microscope. The same way 3 witnesses who'd never met my son somehow had their names on his final wishes. Fake witnesses, fake signatures, it happens daily. Subscribe before someone forges your family's future. Back home, I spread the witness statements across my kitchen table. Maria's class schedule. Robert's moving receipts from Florida. Jennifer's hospital time card showing she was working a double shift the day she allegedly drove to a lawyer's office. 3 people. 3 alibis. 3 signatures that weren't theirs. The pattern wasn't random, it was calculated. Someone had chosen witnesses who seemed credible but lived far enough apart that they'd never compare notes. Working-class people who wouldn't have lawyers of their own. People who trusted that legal documents were legitimate. But they'd made one mistake. They'd picked people with integrity. Would you chase down questionable witnesses or trust the system? Comment your move. This signature wasn't written by the same person, she said, pointing to the microscope image. Different pressure, different angle. Dr. Patricia Reynolds had been analyzing handwriting for 23 years. Her office smelled like old paper and magnification equipment. She wore reading glasses that made her eyes look enormous as she moved between David's real signature and the one on the disputed will. See this? She pointed to a projection on the wall showing both signatures side by side, enlarged 10 times normal size. Your son naturally pressed harder on downstrokes. This forged version shows consistent pressure throughout, that's someone copying carefully, not writing naturally. I leaned forward. The differences were obvious now that she showed me. David's real signature had little flourishes, places where the pen lifted slightly. The fake one was too perfect, too careful. The ink analysis tells an even clearer story. Dr. Reynolds clicked to another slide. The hospital documents your son signed during his treatment? Blue ballpoint, probably a Bic. The will signature? Gel pen, different chemical composition entirely. She handed me a thick report with charts and measurements. Pressure mapping shows the forger was right-handed copying a left-handed signature. Your son was left-handed, correct? Always. Since he was 3 years old and refused to hold his crayon the right way. The forger did decent work, good enough to fool a casual observer. But under forensic analysis? She tapped the microscope. It's clear simulation, not authentic execution. Dr. Reynolds pulled up photos of other documents in her computer. I've seen this pattern before. Someone practices the signature multiple times, gets comfortable with the basic shape, then executes it when they feel confident. But they can't replicate the unconscious muscle memory that creates authentic handwriting. The report included something I hadn't expected. The will shows evidence of erasure and rewriting. Someone changed their mind while forging this signature. They started over at least twice. How can you tell that? Microscopic paper fiber disruption. When you erase something completely and start over, it leaves traces. Whoever did this wasn't comfortable with forgery, they were nervous, made mistakes, tried to perfect it. She pointed to one section magnified so much I could see individual paper fibers. Right here, you can see where they pressed too hard trying to match your son's natural pen pressure. The paper actually tore slightly. The report conclusion was one line: signature exhibits characteristics consistent with simulation, not authentic execution. Dr. Reynolds saved everything to a digital file encrypted with court-level security. This evidence will hold up in any legal proceeding. The scientific analysis is definitive. I walked out of her office with proof in my hands. Not just suspicion or gut feeling, scientific certainty that someone had forged my son's final wishes. Science doesn't lie, but people do. Have you ever had to prove something everyone else accepted? The nurse remembered me perfectly. You were here every day for 6 months. Who's claiming you weren't involved? Melissa had worked the oncology ward for 15 years. She'd seen families come and go, watched some people disappear when treatment got hard and others never leave their loved one's side. She knew which category I fell into. "Let me pull his file," she said, leading me to a quiet office behind the nurse's station. The computer screen filled with months of documentation. "Here, you're listed as primary emergency contact from day 1. Medical decision maker. Insurance contact. You signed consent forms for every major treatment." The records told the story of those horrible, precious months. My signature on surgical consent forms. My phone number for medication updates. Notes from doctors: patient's mother reports increased pain overnight. Mother concerned about appetite changes, patient confirms. "Look at this," Melissa scrolled through visitor logs. "You averaged 10 hours a day here. Some days you never left. Remember when he had that reaction to the new chemo? You slept in the chair for 3 nights straight until we convinced you to use the family room." The dates created a timeline that destroyed the will's narrative. How could I be an estranged mother when I was documented as present for every major medical decision from January through June? Melissa printed page after page. Physical therapy notes mention you helping David practice walking exercises. Nutritionist recorded meal preferences you provided because he couldn't keep anything down. Social worker documented your questions about home care options. Medical records remember what families forget. Subscribe, your caregiving deserves legal protection. But the most powerful evidence was something I'd forgotten. The advance directive, Melissa said softly. David updated it in March, right after his second surgery. Named you as healthcare proxy and specified that all end-of-life decisions should prioritize your input over other family members. March. The same month the will was allegedly changed to exclude me. That doesn't make sense, I said. If he trusted me with life and death medical decisions, why would he cut me out of his estate? Melissa had seen enough family drama to recognize the patterns. "Honey, in 15 years working oncology, I've never seen a patient give healthcare power to someone they didn't trust completely. Those decisions are too important." She made copies of everything: visitor logs, emergency contact forms, healthcare proxy documents, medication consent forms. Months of evidence showing continuous, intimate involvement in David's care. The charge nurse pulled me aside as I was leaving. "Someone called last week asking us to change your contact status in our system. Said there had been family changes and you were no longer involved." We refused. "Who called?" "Didn't give a name. Just said they were handling David's affairs now and needed us to update our records. Claimed you'd moved out of state and weren't available for medical decisions anymore." I stood in that hospital hallway where I'd spent so many anxious hours, holding documentation of my devotion to my son. Someone was actively trying to erase my role even after his death. Drop every day if you've been a caregiver whose sacrifice was later denied. The judge's order was 2 words: motion granted. I didn't celebrate, I finally exhaled. The courtroom was mostly empty at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. Just me, my attorney Sarah Chen, and a clerk who stamped documents with the efficiency of someone who'd seen it all. The relatives who'd been so eager to divide David's estate weren't there. Emergency motions don't require the other side's presence. All assets belonging to the David Morrison estate are hereby frozen pending investigation into allegations of document fraud and elder abuse, Judge Martinez read from his prepared order. No distributions shall be made, no accounts closed, no property transferred until further order of this court. Sarah had warned me it might take weeks to get a hearing. Emergency preservation motions are hard to win, she'd said. Judges don't like to interfere with properly executed wills. But the evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures. Missing witnesses. Hospital records contradicting the will's claims. A pattern so clear that even a busy family court judge could see it in 15 minutes. The clerk handed me a certified copy of the order. This needs to be served on the executor and any financial institutions holding estate assets, she said. They have 24 hours to comply. Sarah made calls from the courthouse steps. First to the bank where David's accounts were held. Emergency preservation order issued this morning. Yes, I'll fax it immediately. Then to the insurance company. The investment firm. The mortgage company holding the title to his house. By noon, every cent of David's estate was locked down. The anonymous tip came through my daughter-in-law's network that afternoon. Check the Cayman account opened the week he died. I stared at the text message. What Cayman account? Sarah looked up from her laptop. If someone opened an offshore account using estate funds, that's not just fraud, it's money laundering. We need to call the FBI. The preservation order had worked better than we'd hoped. Instead of just stopping future theft, we'd caught active money movement. Someone had been so confident in their plan that they'd already started moving assets overseas. The tip came from someone inside their operation, Sarah said. Someone who knows about the offshore transfers and wants to stop them. I thought about the scared paralegal, the nervous witnesses, the hospital staff who'd refused to alter my contact information. Good people caught in a bad system, finally finding their voices. Small victories count. When did a yes change everything for you? They held the memorial service without telling me. I found out from the florist who asked why I canceled my order. Mrs. Morrison? This is Janet from Asheville Flowers. I'm calling about your son's memorial service arrangement. Did you want to reschedule the delivery instead of canceling? I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. What memorial service? Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Grace Community Church. The family ordered a large display and mentioned you were handling separate flowers. But we got a call this morning saying you'd canceled your order. I hung up and drove straight to the church. The parking lot was being set up with white tents and tables. A catering truck was unloading folding chairs. Someone had planned a major event. Pastor Williams saw me getting out of my car and walked over quickly. Susan, I'm so glad you're here. I was confused when they said you couldn't attend your own son's memorial. They said what? Your nephew Mark called last week. Said the family wanted to do something special for David, but you were too grief-stricken to participate. Asked if we could handle everything. His face showed genuine concern. I offered to visit you, but he said you needed space. The setup was elaborate, professional catering, printed programs, even a photographer. This wasn't a simple memorial. This was a performance. I slipped into the back of the church 20 minutes before the service started. Relatives I recognized filled the front rows, some I hadn't seen since David was in elementary school. They'd driven from 3 states to attend a memorial for someone they'd barely visited during his illness. The program listed Mark Morrison as service coordinator and featured a timeline of David's life that erased my presence entirely. Devoted son who found peace in his final months surrounded by loving extended family. No mention of the daily hospital visits, the chemo treatments, the nights I held his hand through fever dreams. They'll memorialize you while erasing you legally. Subscribe, don't let death become theft. Mark stood at the podium talking about David's independent spirit and how he'd chosen to face his final battle with dignity and privacy. Code words that made isolation sound noble and caregiving sound intrusive. But the real intelligence came during the reception. I positioned myself near the dessert table where conversations flowed freely. People assumed I was just another distant relative. The paperwork's already filed, I heard Mark's wife whisper to another cousin. Clean execution, no complications. What about the mother situation? Handled. She got emotional at the lawyer's office, made some threats, but the will is ironclad. 3 witnesses, properly notarized, everything legal. The cousin lowered her voice. I heard she's been calling witnesses, asking questions. Let her ask. The documentation is perfect. She can hire all the lawyers she wants, the distribution is locked in. Then Mark appeared beside them, speaking quietly into his phone. Phase 2 starts Monday. The old lady's motion won't hold. I moved closer, pretending to examine the flower arrangements. The judge granted an emergency freeze? That's impossible. His voice carried irritation now. How long does that hold everything up? I couldn't hear the response, but Mark's face went dark. Find out who helped her file that motion. And find out fast. Ever been excluded from honoring someone you cared for? Share how that felt. The paralegal met me in the Walmart parking lot at dawn. She had copied everything before they could destroy it. Casey Martinez looked terrified but determined as she approached my car. 25 years old, student loans, working 2 jobs to pay for night law school. The kind of person who shouldn't risk everything for a stranger, but sometimes does anyway. I've been there 18 months, she said, sliding a manila envelope through my passenger window. I've never seen anything like this case. The way they talked about you. It wasn't legal strategy. It was personal hatred. The envelope contained photocopies of documents I'd never seen. Email chains between Mark and the law firm's senior partner. Billing records showing meetings I'd never been invited to. Draft versions of the will with handwritten notes in margins. Look at this one, Casey pointed to an email dated 2 weeks after David's funeral. Subject line, Morrison cleanup. They're talking about you like you're a problem to be solved. The email was clinical in its cruelty. Eldest son's mother presents ongoing risk to distribution plan. Recommend proactive legal positioning to discourage contest. Client reports she was overly involved in medical decisions and may claim undue influence. But the next email made my blood cold. Per client request, research involuntary commitment procedures for elderly individuals exhibiting erratic behavior related to grief. Include costs and timeline. They'd been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. The billing records show the real timeline, Casey said. 12 meetings with your relatives starting the day after David's diagnosis. They weren't planning his estate, they were planning your removal. Document after document revealed a calculated campaign. Character assessment reports describing me as emotionally unstable due to son's illness. Legal research on elder mental competency challenges. Meeting notes about neutralizing potential contest risk. Digital trails never lie, but they disappear fast. Subscribe so you catch the evidence before deletion. But here's the worst part, Casey's voice shook. This isn't their first case like this. The billing showed 12 other cases with the same pattern: caregiver erasure, asset concentration, witness coaching. She handed me a second folder. I pulled files on the other cases when no one was looking. Same methods every time. Find the primary caregiver. Usually a woman, usually exhausted from caregiving. Isolate her legally while she's grieving. Use grief against her, make her look unstable. The pattern was systematic. Elderly father with devoted daughter, daughter erased, estate to distant son. Sick mother with caring daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law removed, assets to biological children who'd been absent for years. Same law firm. Same techniques. Same result. Most people don't fight back, Casey explained. Caregivers are exhausted. Grieving. They don't have energy for legal battles. The firm counts on that. Why are you showing me this? Casey looked toward the sunrise breaking over the parking lot. My grandmother raised me. If someone tried to erase her after everything she sacrificed, I'd want someone to help me fight back. She got back in her car quickly. I never saw you. You never saw me. But Mrs. Morrison? Make them pay for what they've done. Would you risk your job to expose systematic fraud? Respect to those who choose justice. Their lawyer's threat letter was 3 pages. My response was 1 paragraph, and copied to the State Bar. The envelope arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday morning. Thick paper, law firm letterhead, the kind of formal presentation designed to intimidate. Cease and desist, in bold letters across the top, followed by accusations of harassment, interference with the state administration, and threats of prosecution for malicious litigation. They demanded I stop contacting witnesses, return all copied documents, and accept the will as valid or face criminal charges for obstruction of justice. I read it twice, then called Sarah Chin. Standard intimidation tactics, she said after I read her the letter. They're scared. People don't send threats when they're confident in their position. What do? We respond with everything we've got. Our reply was surgical. 1 paragraph acknowledging their letter, followed by attachments that told the real story. Forensic handwriting analysis. Witness alibis. Hospital records proving continuous caregiving. Casey's leaked documents showing systematic elder abuse. Bank records of the mysterious Cayman account. But Sarah added something I hadn't expected. She copied the response to 5 different agencies. North Carolina State Bar for attorney misconduct. Adult Protective Services for elder abuse. FBI Financial Crimes Unit for the offshore accounts. IRS for tax evasion. And the local district attorney's office. Is that legal? Completely. When you have evidence of systematic criminal activity, you have a duty to report it. The response hit like a bomb. Within 48 hours, the law firm's senior partner called Sarah directly. Perhaps we can discuss a reasonable resolution to this matter. Your clients can start by returning my client's son's estate intact, Sarah replied. Then we'll discuss the damages for emotional distress and legal fees. Legal bullying stops when you fight back smart. Subscribe, learn the weapons they don't expect. But Mark wasn't backing down quietly. He filed a countermotion claiming I was mentally unstable due to grief and requesting a competency evaluation. The motion cited my erratic behavior, including harassing witnesses and making wild accusations against respected family members. Sarah laughed when she read it. He just made our case for us. How? Because now we get to present all our evidence in open court. Every forged document, every fake witness, every piece of Casey's leaked files. He's given us the platform we needed. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Sarah spent the week preparing what she called the presentation from hell. We're not just defending your competency, she explained. We're exposing their entire operation. 12 other families they've targeted. The systematic pattern of elder abuse. The offshore money laundering. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in David's kitchen, surrounded by evidence of months of investigation. Photos of forged signatures. Witness statements. Hospital records. Bank documents. The paper trail of a son's love transformed into a family's greed. My phone buzzed at 11 p.m. Text from an unknown number, they're planning something for tomorrow. Be ready. Casey. Still watching out for me even after risking her job. I texted back, ready for what? Character witnesses. People who will say you were unstable during David's illness. They've been contacting your neighbors, his doctors, anyone who saw you during the worst days. Of course. They would use my grief against me. The sleepless nights I'd spent at his bedside. The times I'd cried in hospital hallways. The weight I'd lost worry about his treatment. All of it would become evidence of mental instability. Ever been legally threatened for standing up? Drop, fight back if you didn't back down. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Someone had leaked the elder abuse investigation to Channel 7. I arrived early, hoping to slip in through a side entrance. Instead, I walked into a media circus. 3 news vans, cameras being set up, reporters checking microphones. Sarah met me at the courthouse security checkpoint. "Did you call the press?" I asked. "Didn't have to. The FBI raid on the law firm yesterday made the evening news. When reporters started digging into why federal agents were seizing files, they found our court filing. The FBI had raided the offices at dawn," Casey later told me. "Agents with boxes, copying hard drives, interviewing staff. The senior partner had arrived to find his office sealed with federal evidence tape." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Usually, these hearings drew maybe 5 people: attorneys, family members, a clerk. Today, every seat was filled. Reporters with notepads. Other families who'd seen the news and recognized their own stories. Judge Martinez called for order. This hearing was requested to determine the mental competency of Susan Morrison, mother of the deceased David Morrison. However, given the evidence presented and the ongoing federal investigation, this hearing will address broader issues of estate fraud and elder abuse. Mark's attorney stood to object, but Judge Martinez cut him off. The court has reviewed the preliminary evidence. The signatures in question have been scientifically proven to be forgeries. The listed witnesses have provided sworn affidavits that they never signed any documents. This is no longer a family dispute, it's a criminal matter. Sarah presented our evidence methodically. The forensic handwriting analysis projected on screens for everyone to see. Audio recordings of witness interviews. Hospital documentation of my continuous caregiving. Casey's leaked documents showing the systematic targeting of elderly caregivers. But the most powerful moment came when Jennifer Walsh, the hospital witness, stood to speak. "I've worked in healthcare for 20 years, she said, her voice steady. "I've seen good families and bad families. Susan Morrison was at that hospital every single day for 6 months. She slept in uncomfortable chairs, learned medical terminology to understand his treatment, advocated for his pain management when he couldn't speak for himself. The idea that this woman was estranged from her son is the cruelest lie I've ever heard. Settlement silence protects future predators." Subscribe. Some fights matter beyond personal winning. One by one, other families stood up in the gallery. "They did this to my mother. Same law firm, same tactics. We never fought back because we thought it was legal." Judge Martinez listened to each story. 12 families. Same pattern every time. Caregiver erasure followed by asset concentration to distant relatives who paid the law firm substantial fees. The settlement offer arrived during the lunch recess. Mark's attorneys handed Sarah a folder. Full restoration of inheritance plus punitive damages. Client agrees to public apology and restitution to other affected families. Sarah read the terms aloud. Complete restoration of David's original will naming you as primary beneficiary. $50,000 in damages for emotional distress. Public acknowledgement that you were David's devoted caregiver. And... She paused, reading the final clause. Non-disclosure agreement. You accept the settlement, you never discuss this case publicly. No interviews, no book deals, no helping other families fight similar cases. I looked out the courthouse window at the families who'd driven hours to attend this hearing. People who'd been robbed the same way but never had the evidence to fight back. People who needed to know this battle could be won. The settlement would restore David's wishes and compensate me for the pain. But it would also ensure that the system that enabled this abuse could continue operating in the shadows. Public shame often works better than private lawsuits. Have you seen justice through exposure? I could take the money and stay quiet, or reject the settlement and help 12 other families. The conference room felt smaller with so many lawyers packed around the table. Mark sat at the far end, avoiding eye contact. His attorneys had prepared a comprehensive settlement package, full inheritance restoration, damages, even a written apology acknowledging my role as David's devoted caregiver. "Mrs. Morrison," the mediator said, "this is a very generous offer. You'll receive everything your son intended you to have, plus compensation for your legal fees and emotional distress." Sarah reviewed the documents one more time. "The settlement is substantial. You'd be financially secure, David's wishes would be honored, and you could move forward with your life." But the non-disclosure clause sat on the table like a trap. "Sign here, take the money, never speak about systematic elder abuse again. Let other families fight these battles alone, without knowing they could win." "What happens to the other cases if I sign this?" Mark's lead attorney answered smoothly. "Those are separate matters that don't concern this settlement. They concern me. I thought about the woman in the gallery who'd whispered, 'They erased my husband's first wife after 40 years of marriage.' The man who'd lost his family farm because a caregiver daughter was removed from her father's will. How many more families get robbed while I stay quiet?" The room went silent. Everyone understood what I was really asking. Sarah leaned close. "Susan, if you reject this settlement, we go to trial. Trials are unpredictable. You could lose everything. And the stress. The stress of fighting is nothing compared to the stress of staying silent. Settlement silence protects future predators. Subscribe. Some fights matter beyond personal winning." I looked directly at Mark for the first time since David's funeral. "You knew how much I loved him. You watched me care for him through chemo, through surgery, through the worst months of his life. And you decided to steal his final gift to me because you could." Mark's face flushed red, but he didn't respond. "The settlement includes a substantial non-disclosure provision," the mediator continued. "You'd be legally prohibited from discussing any aspect of this case, including the methods used to challenge the will. So 12 other families never learn they can fight back. Mrs. Morrison, consider your own well-being. You've been through tremendous trauma. This settlement allows you to heal and move forward." I stood up slowly, gathering the settlement papers into a neat stack. My son raised me better than that. I slid the unsigned settlement back across the table. "See you in court. And bring the other families, they deserve to watch this." Mark's attorney immediately began damage control. "Mrs. Morrison, please reconsider. Trial could take years. The emotional toll. The emotional toll of letting this continue is worse than any trial." Sarah packed up her briefcase with a slight smile. "We'll need to prepare for a very public proceeding. Media attention will be intense." "Good. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Money or justice, which would you choose? This decision defines character." The judge's ruling wasn't just about my son's will, it established legal precedent protecting caregivers statewide. Judge Martinez read his decision for 30 minutes, but the core finding came in the first paragraph. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of systematic elder abuse, document fraud, and conspiracy to deprive legitimate beneficiaries of their inheritance through sophisticated legal manipulation." The courtroom was packed again. Reporters, other victim families, and law students taking notes on what would become known as the Morrison Doctrine, legal precedent requiring enhanced protection for primary caregivers in estate disputes. The evidence presented demonstrates a calculated scheme to exploit grieving families during their most vulnerable moments, the judge continued. The court hereby invalidates the disputed will in its entirety and reinstates the previous version naming Susan Morrison as primary beneficiary. But that was just the beginning. Furthermore, this court finds that the law firm of Henderson, Burke and Associates engaged in systematic elder abuse affecting at least 12 documented families. The court hereby orders the firm to establish a restitution fund of $2.4 million to compensate all identified victims. Sarah squeezed my hand. We'd won more than David's inheritance, we'd won justice for every family they'd robbed. Judge Martinez wasn't finished. The court further orders mandatory reporting protocols for all estate planning attorneys in this jurisdiction. When primary caregivers are removed from inheritance documents, attorneys must now document legitimate reasons and provide independent legal representation for removed parties. Individual courage can change systems. Subscribe. Your fight might protect thousands you'll never meet. The law firm's managing partner stood for the court's questions. Your Honor, we maintain that our firm followed all applicable legal standards. Mr. Henderson, your firm billed over $400,000 in fees for manipulating vulnerable families. The evidence shows deliberate targeting of exhausted caregivers during acute grief periods. This court finds such conduct reprehensible and orders immediate suspension of your estate planning practice pending Bar Association review. After court, the other families gathered on the courthouse steps. 12 separate cases, but the same story repeated. Devoted caregivers erased from wills by relatives who'd been absent during illness but present for inheritance. The precedent you set helps everyone, said Margaret Walsh, whose mother's will had been altered to exclude her after 40 years of caregiving. Future families won't have to fight this battle alone. The final surprise came when Casey Martinez approached me as the crowd dispersed. Mrs. Morrison, I wanted you to know, I passed the bar exam last month. I'm opening my own practice specializing in elder protection. She handed me a business card, Martinez Elder Advocacy. Protecting caregivers, preserving dignity. My first case is pro bono for a family in Charlotte. Same pattern, same law firm. But now we have legal precedent. When did you help others by helping yourself? The scholarship fund bears his name, not on a building, but in the hands of caregivers learning to protect themselves legally. 6 months after the trial, I sat in a community college classroom teaching my first caregiver legal protection workshop. 12 people around a conference table, mostly women, all dealing with sick family members and the legal vulnerabilities that come with intensive caregiving. The most important thing to understand, I told them, is that caregiving without documentation equals legal invisibility. I distributed packets I'd developed with Casey's help. Checklists for documenting medical involvement. Templates for updating emergency contacts. Sample letters to establish caregiver relationships in writing. Simple tools that could prevent the erasure I'd experienced. My son trusted me with his life, I continued, but because we didn't document that trust legally, others were able to claim I was estranged from him after his death. Maria, a teacher caring for her father with Alzheimer's, raised her hand. How do we protect ourselves if family members are already being hostile? Document everything. Hospital visits, medication management, doctor appointments. Create a paper trail that shows continuous involvement. And most importantly, encourage your loved one to state their wishes in writing while they're still competent. The David Morrison Caregiver Protection Fund had grown beyond my expectations. Donations from other families who'd faced similar battles. Grants from elder advocacy organizations. Even contributions from attorneys who'd seen too many legitimate caregivers erased from estates. The best memorial isn't marble, it's protection. Subscribe so your caregiving becomes legally bulletproof. After class, I drove to the small memorial garden I'd planted behind David's house. Not the grand public memorial his relatives had staged, but something quieter. Native North Carolina plants that would bloom every spring. A simple bench where I could sit and remember not his final months of illness, but 30 years of shared laughter, arguments, dreams, and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. His coffee mug sat on my kitchen counter now, next to a stack of legal guides I was writing for families like ours. Protecting the Protectors, a caregiver's legal handbook. Simple language, practical advice, real tools to prevent the theft of final gifts. The book's dedication was one line: for every caregiver whose love deserves legal protection. David's true memorial wasn't in granite or bronze. It was in the hands of other caregivers learning to document their devotion before grief made them vulnerable. It was in changed laws that protected the people who showed up during the hardest days. It was in making sure love had legal standing. What legacy would you want from your hardest fight? Share the memorial that matters most.